Hey everyone, welcome. This is the What's New in WinJS Windows Phone and the Road Ahead session. My name is Paul Gus Marino, and I'm a program manager on the developer experience, actually it's called the developer ecosystem and platform team now in the operating system group. And we're the team that builds a lot of the platform features you use across Windows devices, phones, PCs, Xbox, and so forth to build apps and client experiences. And I'm really proud to be here on behalf of the Web Frameworks team that builds WinJS to talk to you about what's new here. To help me understand a little bit about the audience I have here, how many of you have ever used WinJS at all to build anything before? Hey, all right, check that out. How many of you here, just because in the keynote they announced that we're making it open source and cross-platform? All right, I thought that might have that effect. Even though we're up against Anders telling you about TypeScript. This talk really applies to people who are both new to WinJS, as well as people who've used it before. I'm going to talk about stuff at a fairly conceptual level, but we'll show some code as well. And we'll talk about the new features and kind of advancements that we're doing. And we'll address some of the stuff that was announced this morning and that some of you have been tweeting about and reading about and visiting our web pages about and our GitHub about already. So we're going to cover kind of a big picture of what's new. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the principles to set context about how do we get to where we are and how are we moving forward and how do we think about what WinJS is. I'm going to spend most of the time today doing a deep dive on the new features, talking about the new features that we've kind of made available today. And then I'm going to spend some time talking about and doing some actual demos of kind of the road ahead and how we're thinking about that before we get on to next steps. So let's kind of dive into that and talk about the big picture of what's new. There really are two big new announcements kind of that we're making today with regard to WinJS. And I want to talk about what these mean both for people who are coming from a Windows development background as well as for people who are coming from a web development background. The first announcement of today is that we're introducing WinJS 2.1 for phone. Those of you who are familiar with WinJS know that we already have WinJS for Windows since we first launched it in 2011 at a build conference. The current version for most Windows PCs, for laptops and tablets and desktops and so forth, is WinJS 2.0. And it's actually the UI framework that's used to power many of the apps that we have in Windows 8.1 today. And so we're very excited about WinJS 2.0, and today we're adding for phone a new version, WinJS 2.1, that builds upon WinJS 2.0 and adds extra new features and optimizations for the phone experience. And so that's the first kind of big thing we're announcing today. And then the second thing we're announcing today is the WinJS open source project. And specifically, Microsoft OpenTech is releasing today under the Apache 2.0 license WinJS source code for both 2.0 and 2.1. It's kind of one combined source code base for both of those to GitHub. And it's actually already there. And we've already had a pull request that we've taken in like a few hours. So thank you, everyone, for kind of jumping on that. Through the open source project, that's how we're going to be kind of moving forward, not just to advance WinJS for Windows devices, but to bring it to modern web browsers, and also to bring it to modern kind of mobile device platforms so that you can use it to develop the user experiences of applications across Windows and other devices and the web. And so this is going to be kind of the basis of future versions of WinJS. And so today we're announcing the beginning of this project and going open with that. And so we're going to talk about both of these kind of announcements today, both the 2.1 for phone and kind of the open source announcement, the cross-platform announcement. So let's think about these first from the perspective of a Windows developer. And so today, if you're building a Windows app in HTML and JavaScript, there are three main sets of APIs that Microsoft provides for you in the client to build your app. There's, of course, HTML5, the powerful cross-platform runtime that powers the web and has the latest cutting-edge features like WebGL that was demoed this morning in the keynote and so forth. There's WinRT, which gives you access to everything that Windows has. It gives you access to storage and devices and system resources and sensors. It gives you the ability to do cross-app communication with contracts like the share contract. It gives you the ability to plug into the shell with things like notifications and lock screens. And then there's WinJS, which is a JavaScript library. It is a set of JS, CSS files that gives you infrastructure and controls for building the UI of your app. Controls like list view, and app bars, and semantic zoom, and many others. And so that's kind of what Windows developers have today. And so the first thing, of course, that you're getting with the Universal Apps announcement is that now you can build universal Windows apps with HTML and JavaScript. And so now you can build universal apps that use HTML and WinJS and WinRT across devices. And so that's kind of the first obvious kind of thing this means for people from Windows developer perspective. But when we look at this chart, and this is usually how we show it, one of the things that doesn't come across is how WinJS works with other JavaScript libraries. And so actually, I think a more accurate way to draw the picture is as like this. We kind of designed WinJS from the ground up to actually work alongside other JavaScript libraries. And so if you like and you use Angular for the MVC model it offers, if you use Knockout because you like the data binding there, if you use jQuery, if you use Bootstrap because you like the responsive layouts, they make it easy to do, WinJS works with all those things, and it's been designed to do that. And I'm going to go into that more. But when we really think about the picture of what's available for people developing universal Windows apps with HTML and JavaScript, it's really WinRT and HTML and WinJS and all these other JavaScript libraries that people like to do. And that's kind of part of the ethos of the web. That's a part of the ethos of kind of the community way people develop software with HTML. And so I think it's a more accurate way to kind of present really what's offered for you. So now let's flip it around, actually. Let's look at it from a web developer's perspective. Well, if you're developing for the web today, a cross-platform website or web app, you have all these JavaScript libraries you can use, and you have HTML. And so what we're adding there, of course, with our announcement is we're going to be bringing WinJS to that and making that available. We're humbled by kind of entering this space. There's a lot of JavaScript libraries out there. But we're also excited about it. We think we have some unique, exciting things in WinJS. We're excited to work with everyone to kind of bring that to the web community so people can use those things for the web as well. And so if you kind of combine these two perspectives, we think really the picture you get is something like this. And this, what I like about this picture is it shows how you can really share a lot of code, especially when it comes to the UI of your app, between a universal Windows app you write in HTML and JavaScript and a cross-platform website or web app. And so this is kind of, I think, really an accurate way to think about what is, how do you think about WinJS and how it's situated from a web developer's perspective and how it's situated from a Windows developer's perspective. So now let's kind of dive in on WinJS. It's for both Windows and web developers. And let's talk about what is it and what are our principles kind of behind it. And these are the principles that we've used since the inception of the project in kind of designing it and figuring out what we put in it and how it works. And I think they're principles that are going to guide us forward, too, as we kind of, in a more open way, develop the product with everyone here and in the community. The first is the idea that WinJS delivers true app experiences. Users have specific expectations about how apps work that are not the same as maybe what you might expect in a website. And it's always been a goal of WinJS to really give you that actual app experience, not something that just kind of like a screenshot looks like the app experience, but that actually works from a user's perspective like the app. On the PC, in WinJS 2.0, for example, that means having really detailed keyboarding support, because people, when they're using apps, they expect they can arrow key around and tab around and use shortcuts, and all that stuff works. On the phone, it means things like the nuances of the animations being exactly the way people expect them to be on the phone, because those animations have meaning sometimes on the phone, and they indicate different things to users. And so it's kind of a principle of WinJS to deliver true app experiences. And that's why so many of the apps in Windows 8.1 use it. The second principle of it is to build with native performance. Now, this is one of the most misinterpreted principles that we have, so I want to be clear about it. Sometimes people come to me and say, is WinJS some weird version of JavaScript by Microsoft or something like that? People have all sorts of interesting ideas about what it is. And no, what we mean when we say it's built with native performance is that when we've thought about what is actually performance critical in an application, it turns out when you're designing an app, there's some things that really do have performance criticality to them and other things that don't. A great example is animations. It is super inefficient, and you're going to have really bad performance if your animation is a for loop of moving a JavaScript DOM object over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's going to be really bad. Don't do that. Where there are other things that really don't need that native kind of performance. In fact, if you look at even high-end video games, a lot of them are written with a lot of script for a lot of layers of stuff and then native for other things. Even, it's kind of a fundamental principle of engineering. A lot of things are done in hardware or are they done in software. And so for us, built with native performance is really about this idea of scripted native code, of writing code in the right way such that users get a really native experience for the things that need to have a native experience. And so that's why things like animations and so forth, you'll see in WinJS, are always smooth, because we'll only implement them if we can implement them in a way that we think gives that kind of native performance, or we won't have them. Third, enable shared code across devices. We've made sure, as we've released WinJS for phone, and as we've done kind of the Xbox version that I'll allude to or talk about later a little bit, that you can really share actually a lot of code, even if you do have different UIs for different device form factors, even if, as in the keynote, they said that you tailor your user experience to different devices. And that's done both through having common shared utilities and things like that, as well as by having controls that have the same API signature, but maybe adjust the experience or adapt the experience that you get with them. And I'll show you that today. And finally, we seek to not only participate in the community, but to contribute to it as well. We're really not interested in having Microsoft's version of another thing you already have. That's really not our goal. Our goal is to contribute something new to the world, to solve actual problems people have and deliver new innovative solutions to those problems. And we think we have a bunch of stuff in WinJS that is new, that you don't have. And we're excited to be bringing that to the community. And at the same time, to be playing well with the other things that you already have in the community. And so I think you'll see that. And so I hope over today, it always happens to me when I talk a lot, you'll see that through the stuff that we're doing, that we really are focused on these ideas of delivering true app experiences, building with native performance, enabling shared code across devices, and contributing to the community and contributing something new. So let's deep dive on those new features. WinJS for phone 2.1, here are a bunch of the new kind of updates in there. There's a whole new control, the pivot control. I'll talk about that. There's improvements in the list view, the app bar, and the semantic zoom controls. And there's some changes and improvements in building blocks around animations, user themes, and accessibility. So let's dive into these. Let's talk about pivot first. Has anyone here not ever seen a Windows phone and played with a pivot control in it before? Great. So you all know what the pivot control is. It's an essential control in Windows Phone that is used for lots of apps, including Mail and so forth. And let's go take a look at the pivot control that we've added to WinJS. All right. So here I have an app that we made. It's just a test app or a sample app. We actually put this in an SDK sample so you can play with this yourself. So here I have, this is actually WinJS code. This is just HTML and WinJS. This is no other magic than that. You can kind of flip between sections. You have the great animation as you do so. So I swipe to the left, swipe to the right. You can tap on the headers. And as I tap on the headers, let's see if on my PC it works. Otherwise, I'll just keep doing it on the phone. That's fine. Inside each section of the pivot, you can have arbitrary content. So here I have put actually a giant virtualized list view control inside that pivot. So you can see that kind of performance and quality feels pretty native to me. It's a really nice implementation of a pivot control. You can even do things like remember kind of your position. So here I've kind of cut off half this person's name. I've gone ahead. I go back. It's still in that same position. So it's a really great implementation of the pivot control. It also works with rotation. So let's try to rotate. Let's see if we can get that to work. I'll force it. Let's try that. All right. Nope. All right. Well, that's my demo setup. But you can rotate it, and it rotates beautifully. Now let me see if I can unrotate it. This is our lovely projection app. All right, there we go. Well, I'll happily show you, or you yourself can go try rotating it, and you'll see how lovely that works. So that's the pivot control. Using it, we designed the API set of it to be very familiar to anyone who's used the hub in the past. You just instantiate a pivot control, And then you can have one or more pivot items inside it. It's kind of like sections in a hub if you've used a hub before. Each item can have a header, which is that header you see at the top, and then you can have, again, arbitrary content inside it. And so it's very easy to get that kind of very natural native phone pivot experience. You can go and try that out. The second area that we've kind of improved is around the app bar. So the app bar on the phone is quite different than the app bar on Windows because it's a much smaller form factor, and there's different ways that you use it. Whereas you usually use a Windows device with multiple fingers, a phone is very commonly used with one finger. And so there are different design considerations that the design team used in designing how the app bar should work on the phone versus on a larger Windows tablet device. Specifically, on the phone, you'll see that it has a kind of a range of sizes. It has a compact mode in addition to a minimal mode. And it has this idea of, since you can only fit up to 4 buttons side by side, some buttons go below in a section lower, like where you see the camera command. And so let me show you how you can use that on the phone with WinJS as well. All right. Whoops, that's not the right app. This is another app the team built, and we've also posted this one as an SDK sample so that you can play with it and explore it. So I'm just going to create an app bar. Here I've created, this is a WinJS app with an app bar. You see those 3 little buttons at the bottom. That's kind of the compact mode of the app bar. I can expand it if I want with a swipe. I can tap on the phone to dismiss that. I can jiggle it around. There you go. It's kind of that standard app bar that you expect. In addition, if I hit the back button, when it's open, that'll also dismiss it, following in the standard phone behavior for the app bar. You can do customization of the app bar. You can go and you can color it if you have some coloring you want to do in your app. So here someone made it blue and green. You can use it alongside a list view. So in a scenario like this, you want to change the actual icons or the buttons on it. You can do that dynamically on the fly. So here I'm selecting some items, and you can see that the buttons changed as I selected or unselected items. So you can do those kinds of scenarios, and you have the standard animations that come and go as it does that. If you rotate the phone, this time it worked sort of. You can see that the icons rotate along with it and following kind of the look and feel of phone. So it's a really nice implementation of the app bar that kind of meets the expectations of users on the phone device. Using the app bar, well, it's the same API set you use on Windows again. So you create an app bar object, and then you can put one or more app bar commands in it. Each app bar command can have a label, an icon. It can have an ID associated with it that you listen to click events on to do actions. You can add a bunch of them. Just like on Windows, you can specify a section. It can be either the global section or the selection section. And on Windows, those get mapped one way, and on phone another way, and I'll talk about that. We've added a new attribute you can set, or a new option you can set, is the closed display mode. Because like I showed you on phone, there's 3 different sizes you can have the app bar, whereas on Windows, it's just it's either closed or open. And so this property lets you do that. Both of these properties that I'm showing you, the section property and the closed display mode property, are examples of how the controls adapt. And so the app bar control, even though you can write to the same API set and you can share exactly the same app bar code in the common cases, you'll get the right experience on phone and the right experience on the PC form factor. And that kind of adapts based on how you've set those things. And so, for example, that closed display mode is kind of ignored on the PC because that's not a feature it has on the PC. And the section maps to left and right on PC, and whether things are in the bar section or the little overflow section on the phone. All right? So let's take a look at that. And I also want to take this opportunity to show you a universal VS project with WinJS. So here I've actually opened up the app bar SDK sample. So you can see here in the Solution Explorer, there actually are 2 projects in here. There's the phone version, which is down here, and there's the Windows version. So you can expand each of these and kind of see the source code of them. And there's this shared section where the shared code that you've shared across both the phone and the Windows app goes. And I'm going to open up, actually, in there I have this file called create app bar, which I'm kind of opening up. Actually, I already opened it, so I'm going to keep just this instance of it open. And this is actually where the app bar is created in that SDK sample. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the SDK sample first so you can see it both on phone and on PC. And then I'm going to change it and show you how it changed the right way for each form factor. So here's that sample running on the PC. Here you'll see the app bar. So I'm kind of right-clicking to make the app bar come up and down, or swiping from the bottom, however you do it. The camera is on the left. Add, remove, and edit are on the right. All right? And there's no, that's just kind of all what you get there. Now let's stop debugging that. Let's switch to go and build the phone version. So that'll run the phone emulator here. Voila. OK, and on the phone, that same code translated to the app bar being in this minimized state where there's just the 3 buttons, and the add, remove, edit being kind of iconographically shown, and the camera being shown as a text string below. Now let's say I wanted to move the edit button to go lower down on the phone. What I do, let's stop debugging this. Actually, let's say I want to make 2 changes to that. The first change I want to make is I want to expand it so it's not so compact. And the second change I want to make is I want to move the edit button down. Here's how I can change just my shared code to do that, and then how it will reflect in both the Windows and the phone versions of the project. So here I'm going to go to, this is the, here you can see this is the command that represents the camera button. And here's the one that represents the edit button. And so I'm going to go to the edit button, and I'm going to change its section to be selection instead of global. So that puts it, instead of in that little top global section, in the lower kind of selection section. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the display mode from being minimal to being compact. Let's build that now on phone. And we will see that, yes, indeed, I now have, instead of it being just the little strip with the 3 little dots, it's the compact mode that has the plus and the minus. And if I expand it out, edit has been moved down below. All right? So I just changed some shared code between my phone and my PC project. And this is the change I was able to make on the phone with that. Let's go back now to rebuild the Windows app version. And on Windows, you'll see now the edit button is on the left with the camera, because it was moved to the selection section. So the same APIs, the same shared code, automatically kind of adapted to the 2 different app bar designs. So that's kind of a demo of the app bar on phone and PC, and how you can share code and get kind of the right experience for each one, and a really native feeling experience for both phone and Windows. Now let's talk about another very popular control, the list view on phone. The list view offers really powerful virtualized lists. I showed you the panning of that a moment ago. I'll pan some more in a minute. And we've adapted it for the phone in WinJS 2.1 to change some of the behaviors around the animations, how some of the tapping stuff works to fit into the phone form factor, and to make certain types of selection models easier. So on the phone, in the Mail app, for example, it's very popular to have this checkbox-style selection model. And so we've made that easier for you to implement with WinJS for the phone. And so let's take a look at that working. Whoops. Let's see here. Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to show is just here's panning through this list. This is just a virtualized list in a little test app we made that simulates kind of the Mail app experience. You can see it's, sorry? Oh, you guys don't see anything. Let's do that one more time. Otherwise, I'm going to switch to this thing. All right, there we go. So there you go. You can see kind of panning through that list. It's doing full UI virtualization. The other thing I'm going to show you is I can tap on the side to start a selection, just like you see in the Mail app, and you get smooth animations as you do that. The next thing I want to show you on the list view is the feathering animation. Let's see here. So as I go into it, Oops. There we go. So you get kind of standard animations built into it for different kind of actions that you do, like launching it and closing it. So that's kind of the list view there. The other thing I want to point out about it is the tiles kind of go in, indent in, depending on where you tap, consistent with the phone design style. So see, I'm tapping on the right-hand side of Vincent, for example, and it kind of indents in there. If I tap in on the left side, it'll indent in there, and so forth. So you get really great kind of experience consistent with what you expect on phone. You also have the features you expect, like grouping. So here's a grouped list. And grouping is there for list views, and so forth. So that's kind of the list view control. And it's the same code you have on your PC for WinJS works on phone for this one. It's the same kind of API design, the same idea of how you program it. And we've updated the behaviors for selection mode and tap behavior to let you create experiences that are adapted for the phone. And if you look at the SDK sample, for example, they show you exactly how to create that checkbox select experience like in the Mail app. Another common thing related to WinJS is called jump list on the phone, but it's semantic zoom. And the semantic zoom control, and that lets you create experiences like this, where you have a long list and you want to jump around to different sections of it. And so that's also here in WinJS for phone. And let's show you that. Switching back to the PC, to the phone. So here's this kind of app that just has a bunch of contacts in a list. I can tap on the letter A, and I get this. You'll notice it had the standard kind of phone animation. I'll hit back so you can see that again. As you kind of did that. So that's kind of built in for you with the control. I can jump to a letter like N, and I get to the N section. I can change my mind. I can tap on P. I can go back to B. So this is all just WinJS semantic zoom control with the WinJS list view control in this sample app here. And using semantic zoom is the same, again, as on the PC. You instantiate semantic zoom, and you put two list views into it, one for what we call the outer view and one for what we call the inner view. So the outer view is that A to Z list section. The inner view would be the full list of content that you have. If you have a semantic zoom you're using on the PC, it'll work on the phone the same way. But we have an SDK sample that shows you how to implement exactly that phone-style jump list with the A to Z list, if that's the exact thing you want to do instead with it. WinJS has always offered a bunch of animations, and there are even more animations that have been added with this version to support kind of the phone style. So I want to show you two of those. One of them is the turn-style animation, and the other one is the slide animation. So these are videos of it. But you can see the turnstile is actually doing something called feathering, where each individual item is kind of in an orchestrated fashion being animated back. The slide is kind of sliding things off to the side in a similar way. And these are all just added to the list of animations that WinJS supports. So the blue animations are new for phone 2.1. The black animations are ones that we've already had. So there's a very extensive list of animations you can use in WinJS, and all of them are based on CSS animations in the browser so that you get that great kind of performance. Using them is very simple. If you just want to do a very simple instantiation of one, you just pass a DOM element to it, like the slide or the turnstile forward that I showed you. If you want to do a fancy feathered type of effect, you just pass an array of elements, and it'll orchestrate doing that for you. So here, for example, we've made it easy with the list view. You can get an array of the different list view items, the DOM elements that represent them, and you can pass that to the turnstile forward animation, and it'll do that effect for you. Okay, so it's very easy to use these animations to create really great looking and feeling experiences for your customers. There's also the matter of user themes. On phone, there's this notion of a user gets to pick. It's the most personal phone, and you can have either the light theme or the dark theme, and you can pick your accent color. And that's also supported by WinJS 2.1 for phone in a really nice way. And let me show that to you with a little intrinsic controls demo app we have. So there's a bunch of controls that we call, whoops. And here's Anders. There's a bunch of controls that we call intrinsic controls, such as checkboxes and buttons and text boxes and so forth. These are things that are typically natively supported by the browser. Oops. Is this my intrinsic controls? Where did my intrinsic controls go? Oh, I was in the right place. All right. So here, let me just kill this and, sorry, there we go. Let's mix those apps. All right, here we go. So this is an intrinsic controls test app. So here my default theme is kind of a blue theme with a black background. So I have checkboxes, radio buttons. WinJS provides style sheets that kind of style all these things for you in a way that is consistent with the phone. This is, oops, I should swipe like Joe does. So you can see you get kind of, everything's kind of colored and styled the way that the user preferred. Now if a user wants to have a different kind of style theme, they can go and they can change that in their settings. So you can go and switch to white theme and maybe red. And then if we go and we launch that app again, things are with a white background and there's a red theme when you can interact with items like buttons and so forth. Okay, so it's very easy to have the user-themed style. And the way we implemented that is if you've used WinJS today, you know there's two style sheets we give you, UI light and UI dark. Well, there's a new one introduced with WinJS 2.1, which is UI themed. And so if you set the UI themed style sheet, it'll just default to the system default style. So the system accent color and the system user set theme color. If you still want to make your app always be white or always be black or always be whatever color you want, you can, of course, override those and use whatever styles you want. It's a very stylable library. But that's kind of how you can get the default that maps to the user. All right, so I talked about a bunch of UI controls and a bunch of the features that have been added for WinJS 2.1 for phone. Now I want to talk about interoperability with other popular libraries. We've talked about this, and I've kind of said to you the claim that, hey, WinJS is really designed from the ground up to be interoperable with other libraries. What do I mean by that? It's been a basic premise for us from the start. And it means that we've layered things, for example, in a way that makes it easy to glue together different toolkits that you might be using from different libraries. For example, all the controls we have, like the list view control, can be instantiated directly in JavaScript. You can new up a list view like any other JavaScript object and interact with it like any other JavaScript object. Or you can use the declarative syntax that we have, the data win control syntax, to define it. But those are separate layers. So you can use a list view without having to use the declarative syntax, for example. And that enables you to use other declarative syntax systems to define it, and I'll show you that. Another example is the list view's binding system, or the templating system of it. We've made a binding template in WinJS that works great with the list view, and it lets you have a really high-performance experience like the one I was showing you when we were panning through that virtualized list on the phone. But the list view is designed to just accept any function that takes data and outputs DOM elements as its templating function. So if you want to use mustache templates or some other templating system, that works. We've really designed it in a very componentized way from the start so that you can interoperate it with other libraries. And I want to show you, and there's two specific things that we've done kind of around that. In fact, on GitHub today, you can go and you can find there's a Angular adapter for WinJS, and there's also a Knockout adapter for WinJS. And these make it very easy for you if you're using something like Angular for the MVC model, or if you're using something like Knockout, to use those along with WinJS. Let me show you that. So here's a piece of, to anyone who's familiar with Angular, looks like a bunch of Angular kind of code. You can see there's a directive there, the win rating directive. That directive is actually, though, instantiating a WinJS rating control because the Angular WinJS adapter made it kind of easy, just kind of plugged into the Angular system directives for the different WinJS controls. And then you can use attributes to set data binding on them. So here the user rating property, for example, is being bound to the rating Angular variable along with the ng model on the input type. So this just looks like Angular code, but it's using WinJS controls. Here's another example, which is using Knockout. So this looks like Knockout. Very different binding system, very different model. We're very open to, and we think these are going to continue to evolve in the industry. So we're very open to all the different models you might want to use for app development. You can still take advantage of the features of WinJS and use WinJS controls. Here in Knockout, the way that the rating control is instantiated is through a binding. So in that last div there, which says data bind, win rating, and then it recursively passes the user rating as a sub kind of property to itself as part of the, and that's just how Knockout binding system works. And so let me just show you that with a real code demo here. So I've got another VS solution. All right, so in this VS solution here, I have two projects. One is using that knockout adapter I talked about. One is using the Angular adapter I talked about. Let's look at the Angular one first. Here you'll see that same code that I showed you on the PowerPoint slide. Here's the directive, the WinRating directive. Here's the attribute that we're going to be binding against, the user rating. Here's the controller. So they added this WinJS module, and then the Angular system kind of hooked up the binding and stuff. And so let's run that to show that kind of working. So here you see the WinJS rating control. It has a very nice experience. I hover over it, does the right stars. I can tab to it, and it'll keyboard around it, works with touch, and so forth, all the things you expect of that control. But it's bound to this text box here. So if I change this value 5 to be 3 or 2 or 1 or 4 or 5 or whatever, it uses the two-way data binding system that Angular has to bind that up. So you can use that WinJS control, for example, along with Angular and its data binding. All right? So that same thing is possible with Knockout, and I won't bother demoing. It's the same kind of demo, but I think you get the idea about how these things can interoperate. And so now I want to talk about the road ahead. So I've kind of told you about WinJS 2.1 for phone. I've showed you a bunch of the new features there, how it lets you create these phone-specific type of experiences. And I've talked about the interoperability, but a lot of people are curious about, well, what are you guys doing next? You guys announced you're going open source today. What's the roadmap? What's the plan for moving forward? And I think the best way to show that is to actually go to our GitHub page and walk you through kind of what's going on there. So let me close these projects. And let me open up our GitHub page. So here's the WinJS project on GitHub. We've already gotten 32 forks and 376 stars and 2 pull requests now, 28 issues, thank you. And there's a README. And if you go through the README, you can learn kind of about stuff. And you'll also see there's a link to a roadmap. Let me open up that roadmap. On the roadmap, we're telling you where have we come from. We're telling you, look, this is the past of WinJS. We had our first version in 2011. We had WinJS 1.0, WinJS 2.0. We have an Xbox version that a lot of the apps on the Xbox One are actually using WinJS. We have the phone version we're announcing today. It talks about the present. What have we done to date? So to get WinJS up into the repository, Microsoft OpenText just pushed it up there, made a bunch of changes. We've had to change the infrastructure so that you can build it, because we want to be really open about it. So you can build WinJS now using Grunt, so that you can fork it, you can make changes, you can issue pull requests, you can do all that stuff. We've moved CSS files to be generated with less now. And we're in the process of moving our unit tests to QUnit. So it's really going to be a very community kind of friendly project, and that's kind of what we consider our first step. And so if we look at our roadmap, you can find up there, it has that history, has this S0, that's kind of our first step, but we're computer scientists, so we zero index. And that's kind of today. The next step for us is really getting it to work great on the web. And so I'll show you some demos of how it's working. I'll show you our test site out, our try build WinJS site, so you can get an idea about how well it's working on the web today. But some of the next things we know we have to do is we know we have work to do on the specific controls and features to get them to work across all the different browsers and so forth. We also know we have some work to do just to make the library more accessible to web developers. And that means modularization and supporting minification, because those are both critical things if you're doing a website type development as opposed to an app type deployment. And then we have some thinking, and the further you get out, those become things that are more hazy and adaptable. But we think there's more convergence work we want to do, or consolidation across devices. Right now there's a WinJS 2.1 for phone versus a WinJS 2.0 for PCs. So we think it makes sense to kind of bring those together to be exactly one library. Same with the Xbox. And new features that we want to explore as well. So why don't I show you now a couple things. The first thing I want to show you beyond this is there's a website we have called try.build.winjs. Here I'm going to nix this emulator. We don't need this anymore. So this is actually our live code preview site. So you can see WinJS and you can try it out on this site. You can go and you can edit the code and get live changes. So here I could, for example, change this. So if I see this list view here, it's a list layout, okay? But if I want, I can go and I can change it to be grid layout. Let me do that just for giggles. All right, so it's a live code preview site, so you can go and start playing with WinJS today, right there in the browser, and start kind of experimenting with it and seeing things you can do. Yeah, you like that, all right, good. You can test out the different features we have. So there's, all the features of list view, we're trying to call out there. So things like reorder support, semantic zoom, flip view, so on and so forth. So you can go and play with all the features of WinJS on the site. What I'd like to show you now actually is the same exact site. I'm going to run it in some other browser. I don't know if there's anyone here who uses this browser, but so here's WinJS running in Chrome. And I'm going to show you some. So here's that list view, panning through that list view nicely in Chrome. Same list view control that we have in WinJS. I'm going to show you some animations. So here, I told you about that animation library we have. Here's that same animation library. So here's the enter page animation, and here it is on Chrome. Here's the page transition animation. Ooh. 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 Sound effects provided by me. Here's the show content animation, and so on and so forth. There's animations. Now I'm going to show you some things that don't work the same, just to be open about, because this is just the starting of this project. So here's the flip view control, if I can find it. Here we go. Here's the flip view control. So let me use that first in IE on the left here. I'm going to make this window bigger to fit. So I can tap around with mouse to switch between things, and you get a nice animation. As I flip through things, it binds to a list of, you can template the data. It's just kind of a list view control type of thing, but it's the flip view. Now I'm going to do that same thing in Chrome, and you get that same type of experience. So you have the same experience in Chrome and in IE here with the flip view control we already have. You can also in Chrome tap on these buttons, and as you tap on them with touch, you also get that transition. So it works with touch as well. Now Internet Explorer supports an emerging standard called snap points. And that enables you to create an even richer touch experience. That's something that Chrome doesn't yet support. And so because it supports that, and WinJS is writing to this kind of emerging standard, with touch on IE, you can actually just swipe back and forth. So that same control adapted. In Chrome, since it didn't have support for that standard, there are the two buttons you can tap on. So with touch, you can still use it to move back and forward. Since IE supported that new emerging standard, you can just swipe on it and get that even more immersive experience. So that paints a picture for you of some of the kinds of issues that we're going to have to deal with as we move forward, and some of the kinds of approaches we might take together as a community to figure out the right way to do this. Another example I'll show you is with reorder in list view. So here's list view, and you can drag something. Here we go, my reorder example. And I can take Marvelous Mint, and I can move it above Lavish Lemon, okay? Reorder support in list view works. Here it is. There it was with mouse, and now I'm going to do it with touch. And it also works with touch in IE. Oops. All right. On Chrome, it's there, and it works with mouse, but it doesn't yet work with touch. So here I go. I'm going to drag with my mouse and reorder it. All right? And you saw still the animations and all that kind of stuff. So that gives you kind of a picture about what's, WinJS, where it's at. It's a live thing. It's on GitHub right now. This try site is live right now, and you can go and try that out and experiment with it and contribute it to it and so forth. And so I want to show you one more thing, and that is how people are thinking about using this for apps. Because I don't know if any of you have heard about a project called Apache Cordova. Has anyone here heard of Apache Cordova? It's an open source project that, otherwise known as PhoneGap, but that's owned by Adobe. It's a different thing now. That seeks to help people build cross-platform mobile apps using HTML as their front end. And so we thought it'd be fun. Someone on the team thought it'd be fun to go and try to use that to make a WinJS app. And so they did. And so here it is. This is, gosh. Can I show the special here? I don't know if you can see the engraving, and this says, "My other tablet is a Surface." So, hold on. Password. All right. So here is, there we go. So this is using the list view, the WinJS list view right here. Gosh, this looks, is your projection better than mine? No. I'm going to hold it this way, and you guys can come up at the end if you want to really see it. But so this is the WinJS list view. It's actually using Bootstrap for this header at the top. So it's kind of just using different libraries together. This is an Apache Cordova app. If we go and we try and create a new expense, it uses Cordova APIs to map to native APIs. So it can, for example, access the camera. And then it uses the camera API that gets routed to the iOS's native camera API, for example. I'll cancel that. Or location, or so forth. So we think it's interesting for people to experiment with and see ways that they can use this even for mobile app development beyond just the web browser. And we think that's an interesting project that's doing that. So let's go back to kind of our deck, because I do want to leave some time for questions. I think people have a bunch of questions at the end. I hope you've seen kind of through the stuff I showed you today that we're trying to make WinJS for both Windows and web developers. And we think it can serve as a useful bridge for people who want to have app experiences that are really great and also have things that work cross-platform, also have things that work on the web. And that we're working together with a bunch of other, to make it interoperable with other libraries so that you can kind of have the best of everything that you want. I told you about the new features that are in phone WinJS 2.1 that let you make really great phone experiences. Things are very iconic, like the pivot and the list view with the selection and the jump lists and the animations and the user themes selection. So you can really get an app that looks and feels like a great phone app this way. I hope you've seen kind of these values come through in what we talked about, that you deliver these true app experiences, that you get that kind of native performance, that you can share code, as I showed with the app bar, for example, really well across devices, that we're contributing to the community and participating there. And some things you can get involved with is the GitHub project itself. We have a buildwinjs.com site, which is where all the documentation is. And that's kind of the official kind of portal. And then we have the try build WinJS site, which is that site I was just showing you. We have the live code previews, and you can experiment with things and see where they're at right now in different browsers and projects. So that's, there's some other talks you may want to see. Some of them have already happened, but you can watch the recordings of them. And coming up, there's a building a large-scale JavaScript application and TypeScript talk, which should be interesting. There's building a converged phone and PC app using HTML and JavaScript. My dev lead for WinJS is going to be co-giving that talk, so that'll be a really interesting one to go see. Should be a lot of fun. Internet Explorer 11's developer tools, F12 just got nicer again. So these are some other talks you might find interesting if you're in the space. They're coming up. So thanks. And I'm going to hang around and answer any questions people may have. Thanks a lot.